Hello, today's video is called I Can't See What's Going On. Today was day 10 of the public inquiry to the federal government for invoking the Emergency Act on February 2022. Today is October 26, 2022. The agenda for today is overview, key details, today's witnesses, and my point of view. As everybody knows, we're doing the daily review of the witnesses that are trying to understand through the inquiry if two things took place on February 14, 2022 in Canada. Number one, did Justin Castro invoke the Emergency Act with enough reasons to do that? And number two, after invoking it, was all the use of the powers exceeding the scope of what should have been granted through the Act? Based on those findings, the lead commissioner is going to put forward a recommendation in English and French by February of next year. Please remember, this is not a trial, it's only an inquiry. All my videos are both on YouTube, Lisa Bruce Research, and the most recent video is always posted on lisabruceresearch.com. That is my own site as well. The link to the live feed and the repository of previous inquiries is shown here in yellow below. I have here the key details that help you to understand all the background in case you have not watched my previous videos, but because this is the third time that I put them on, I'm just going to scroll through them. I'm not going to spend too much time. These are the jurisdictions and the short forms that are going to be used during the presentation. Here's the key timeline with some key dates, key locations that will always be coming consistently throughout the witnesses, and the summary of my position about the things that have been agreed, all the things that have been new in terms of what contributed to the chaos for invoking the Emergency Act. Particularly, this list talks about Chief of Police Slowly and his inability to be the leader that he should have been in that situation. Here is the list of the things that are required to invoke the Emergency Act, how the topic of violence is very critical for the conversations because it's obviously one of the options that you can substantiate the reason for invoking it. Today's witnesses, there were actually two, not three, from 9:30 to 6:20. The first witness was Robert Bernier. He was, if you remember, the major incident commander. He was obviously at the central point of all the operation. And then here we see more disconnections between when the RCMP says something, then remember, he's the center of the operation, and apparently he didn't know. So because sometimes there are notes that prove that he didn't know, these are things that are very interesting to find. Again, major disconnections. Slowly is requesting legal advice for the plan itself, and then Bernier is asking for the legality of all the instruments that will be used through the operation. So clearly you can see they don't even agree on what is the role that legal should be placing in this operation. Here on February 13, Bernier didn't know that the Emergency Act was going to be invoked, and actually we're going to see later that on the 14th, the day of the invocation, he found out in the afternoon. So it's almost as if he found out at the same time that all of us, the regular citizens, found out, which is absurd. Here are some details of the plan, which I found very interesting. I don't know if my audience is going to be as interested as I am in this type of details, so I'm just going to quickly mention some things, and you can stop the screen and go slowly through all the different things. But it's very interesting how he broke the plan in 4 steps: stabilization, action, maintain, and immobilization. So interesting to understand how the police officers understand and build their plans. Here is the cross-examination. So now we are with Slowly, the counselor for Slowly, and he ratified, and I mean Bernier ratified, that ultimately the responsibility of any type of police action rests in the chief of police, in that case Slowly. But at the time you can see the structure of Bernier. Bernier was down here. He's actually an inspector. As a result of this operation, he has not even been promoted. I don't know if that's good or bad, but from the objective point of view, I would imagine in a regular company he would have been promoted because he was the only one who came up with a plan, pulled it together, and actually successfully achieved what they wanted. They obviously used violence, and maybe that's detrimental to his promotion. We're going to see some mention of a disturbing video that was shared in the inquiry today. but he is really low compared to other people that were in the operation in terms of who end up doing the real thing. Here is a timeline, the chronology of his actions when he arrives in Ottawa, when he starts to receive the previous plan, and then when he creates on February 13 what is called the integrated plan that was ultimately the one that was deployed for this operation. Here, obviously slowly, Consular is trying to confirm that previous to having this issue of Bernier asking Ferguson, the deputy commissioner that is a strategic level, to allow him to work without the interference of Slowly, it was actually only on this occasion because in the past they had positive relationships in their working environment. Here there was a freedom convoy. Very interesting because they ask for clarification regarding some resources, and I really didn't understand if this is your objective or list of objectives, I should say. It's a very lengthy information. You don't need to go through the details. I went through the details, but the point is that Bernier was saying that everybody was informed of the objectives of the whole operation, when in reality he communicated through a sticker. And I'm thinking, how can you read a sticker? It just doesn't make any sense. And then he said, well, I was also sending emails. And then when he's asked about, did you read this email? Well, I was receiving so many emails. So he contradicts himself in the sense that he's expecting others to read the emails, but he's not even reading it when he's the center of the operation. Now here, very interesting, on February 1st, the OPS lost 200 members because internally they mandate the injection, and then all the officers said absolutely not, and they lost 200 members. Now remember, this is the OPS has about 1,500 members or 1,200 members, something like that. So to lose 200 is pretty significant. So they were clearly reduced by these own mandates. They were trying to beat against all these protesters in the city of Ottawa. Now here you can see an email saying Inspector Lucas didn't understand the objective. So imagine if one of the people who are closest to Bernier do not understand the objective, how is the new force with a sticker be able to understand? Makes no sense to me, but that's what he said. Overview of the operation, and then again you can see here all the details. Important, we saw this yesterday or the day before, there was no reference to the charter in the final plan, and then Bernier says, oh, it's because it would be a duplication because he was in the other plan. It makes no sense at all, because the charter should have been written, I mean, it's just a line, and they didn't do it. So unacceptable from my perspective. Here, the key targets, and then he said, the question from the Freedom Convoy counselor was, did you approve the custody of protesters and left them in the areas in the worst weather according to you? So in a previous testimony, he was saying that the worst day was actually in that week when after the invocation of the Emergency Act. So he said, well, there were 2 locations, there were 50 minutes with phones and for lawyers, and then they had public transit and restaurants. It just sounds very beautiful when in reality we have videos, we have witnesses, and I saw multiple testimonies, and I believe them, that they were beaten up, they were left in the middle of the road, God knows where, without a mobile. And my question to anyone listening to this video is, what do you do in the middle of the road without a mobile at minus 24 degrees? And the answer is, it's pretty scary. So I don't understand why he doesn't assume responsibility, or maybe I understand why he wouldn't do it. Now, the most disturbing part of the whole day was this video. First, the Freedom Convoy. Actually, I love the Freedom Convoy today as well as yesterday. They placed one picture, and he asked Bernier to identify the different weapons just to confirm that they are rifles. And then she put this video that, if you want to see it, is on minute 301 from the link that I presented in the beginning of the video. I don't want to put it here because it's very disturbing. I actually had to take a break after this finished and then take a deep breath, because this triggers me. The violence that is taped is really strong, so I don't want to put it here, but the point is that you can see clearly there is a rifle that is being pushed, and hit the protester that had been captured behind the line. So if you pay attention here, you can see all the horses with obviously the police officers on top. Here they have created the line, and this is the infamous grab and arrest or grab, or I can't remember the name. Anyway, so what they do is the police officers make a line. Here are the protesters. They grab only one protester. They put it behind and they arrest him. Apparently, you can see how this person who was arrested is being hit. So when the lady from the Freedom Convoy says, okay, what is happening here? Can you tell me what is happening here? And he said twice, I can't see what's going on. I have no comments. Here, different set of rules. Do you remember yesterday or the day before when the convoy was not able to present a document simply because it was the same document that was presented in the past, but it was highlighted? And then I think it was Slowly counselor who said, no, you can't present something that you have not presented to a witness beforehand. Well, because it's the government of Canada, they said, I haven't presented you this, but here is this document, and then we're going to talk about this. So the rules do not apply for everyone. Here, he ignored the intents of PLT in progress. So there's a lot of communication internally talking about all the intention of PLT to remove the biggest protest from Rideau, Sussex, in the area that was, quote, the French area, and apparently they were the most, quote, violent. So, in fact, this video we just saw was filmed in the Rideau, Sussex area. And then everything is talking about the fact that the PLT was demoralized. We're going to read a little bit of a specific report that is a little bit difficult to read if you are inside of the police officer force, because obviously you're losing your people because you're placing them in a very tough position. Social media, gathering information in real time. They placed this video when the lawyer for the convoy was saying, you can keep on coming to Canada, they can't act against us. And this is after the Emergency Act was active. So clearly, I don't know what to say, because from the legal perspective, maybe he was right, but clearly that was not how things evolved. So I am unclear as to why would he say that, and the video was there. Emergency Act was beneficial, but was not necessarily to compel the tow truck. So there's a lot of discussion about this, because the police officers, through different testimonies, have said, well, the Emergency Act was important because the tow trucks wouldn't come and help us because they were afraid of the consequences if we would do that. But obviously, there is proof and document presented today that shows that the trucks were already in the city when the Emergency Act was called, and number one. And number two, the trucks were already moving. We're going to see a little bit in some other moments of the video. Again, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association makes him a series of questions, and then he says the Emergency Act was not required. Here, an example of slowly undermining others. And Bernier himself and another, I don't know if it's a sergeant, I'm bad with these titles. Lucas was saying, well, we need to find out why the bridges are not closed. And then slowly says in the meeting, well, the bridge needs to be closed. I want it done, close everything, no debating. So you can see how it's just very difficult. There's a mistake here. I shouldn't have put that here. In the redirect from the commissioner, one of the subplans of February showing specific requirements of the towing equipment. So that's interesting from my perspective, just to understand what was the ask in terms of the towing. And here in the examination, the lead counselor asked, if the courts determined that you exceeded your powers, what would you say? And he answered, it was done in good faith, and if we knew, we wouldn't have done it. I don't know what to say. And then he asked, were there any plan contemplating an overstaying after the weekend? And the answer is no. So you can ratify the lack of incorporation of the intelligence into the plans. And also the disconnect with PLT. That was perhaps the most difficult part for me, because obviously now we're going to hear from the second witness, that was the superintendent, Robert Drummond. He was in charge of the PLT as well as the PLU. So obviously he knows the level of betrayal that took place with his own people. So he was reporting to Patterson, and then on February 8th, he said that PLT broke communications with Rideau Sussex. I don't know the timeline. Sometimes they're confusing times, but I don't know if this is true or not, but he says the communications were broken. And then here you are going to go deeper into Tom Marazzo and the meeting with Steve Kay, and also a little bit of the different convoys, because apparently Tom Marazzo was not able to, I don't want to say control, but just direct the group of Rideau Sussex or Coventry Road, because there were different convoys and leaders. I'll show it to you in a minute. Here, just a visual of a map that was used during these conversations. Tom Marazzo had to figure out who was staying at Wellington, and others would have to leave, because obviously this is the back of Parliament Hill, which is an empty area, and that's called Wellington area, Wellington Street, and then that's vacant. So obviously it's big, but you can't just put unlimited amount of trucks. So there was a little bit of a debate, and obviously people wanted to stay, not leave, because there's a field or a series of fields close to the city, 10, 15 minutes, whatever the amount of minutes there will be. So nobody wants to drive all the way from the west to just be outside of the city. So fuel. Fuel is a tricky question, because they use it as an excuse to say, okay, you have to remove the fuel because it's dangerous for everyone, which I understand, but obviously they were tricking them with move the fuel, and then that's when they got arrested. And I'm talking about the group from Coventry Road. When they moved the gas to downtown, that's when they were arrested. In February 13, meeting with the mayor to move the trucks, and then on February 14, the movement of trucks was going to start, and then OPS is asking for legal approval of moving the trucks. You can see it's a chaos. It's from beginning to end, it's beyond chaos. 1 p.m. started to move some, but not all truckers wanted to move, and obviously there was no understanding between everyone. And at 1:27 in the afternoon is when Drummond actually hears that the Emergency Act has been invoked. So they knew, as I was sharing, just in the last minute, and then that's when a few hours later, they say, okay, no more movements of trucks. So here is a contradiction, because obviously now everybody was trying to work with a plan, but now there is a different plan with the Emergency Act. Apparently, everybody says, well, it only helped, it didn't change anything, but I disagree, because even Bernier says that his own plan did not contemplate using the Emergency Act, and we already saw that the tow trucks were already inside of the city. Now, this is really tough to read, because obviously you can understand from the perspective of PLT the level of betrayal. So I put here the whole text of the part of the communication that is important. I'm not going to read it because it's very, very long, but you can pause the screen and read it, because the reality is that they were saying, I am ashamed to wear the uniform right now. And I can understand. So if you can read this, you will understand the feeling and a little bit of the details of what was happening with this Coventry Road situation and the arrests that took place that day. Now here, Ottawa Coalition, this is actually redirect, not direct. There were concerns that information were being leaked from the active members to the protesters, and he actually said, Drummond, that one person was shut down. So I'm assuming he was even arrested, because he's betraying his position and the police officers. I found fascinating that even within the police there were a lot of people, and we spoke about this in previous videos. Of course there were people who were supporting the truckers. I mean, who wouldn't? But anyway, they had to pretend that they were, and I'm sure that some people were actually having fun beating the protesters. I don't know. I can't get into their minds, but it's really disturbing. We're going to get back to the video in a minute. And then here's it says, if an accident might have happened, they would have been victims. Oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. They were victims of their own freedom. The Ottawa Coalition. What a horrible remark. Who says that? Anyway, here we go again with the convoy. So very interesting. Now we're going to get into the details of the different leaders in the convoy. There was a list of leaders of the convoy with Tom Marazzo in charge of 322 trucks. And then he says, well, I didn't know this. How couldn't you see that list? I mean, this is the most important thing you should be looking at. If you're in charge, Drummond, of the PLTs, why don't you have the list? That's the most important part of the intelligence that the PLT can bring to you. So, and then he says, well, there was confusion if they were moving or they were staying, so the barriers were not moved. Come on. To me, it feels like a setup. I spoke about setups the other day as well. Then we talk about the deal from the 7 with Tom Marazzo, of course. And then obviously the convoy counselor asked, why didn't you move the barriers? Well, it was unclear again. Then he says, well, actually, we didn't have approval from Patterson. He was the event commander at the time, previously, before Bernet took charge. Here, Demon says everyone who wanted to leave left. I don't know if that's true. I want to believe that's true. I don't know. Now here, the government of Canada was very helpful laying out all the different groups of convoys. So here you can see there were multiple people, multiple leaders. I don't even understand, forgive my ignorance, I don't understand what was the role and the command, let's say, of Tamara Lich and Pat King, because those were the two names that I saw from day one. I actually learned the name Tom Marazzo in the context of this inquiry, and all these names appeared to me. I only heard about these two individuals, and then I don't see them listed here, so I don't understand. And then we have this video of the 13 saying that you shouldn't leave, etc. Bail concerns were at the time between the 11 and the 13. Again, they keep on justifying the Emergency Act. Of course, there was violence and it was volatile and it was escalating and there were right-wing extremists, and it's just inflamming the whole thing. Now, very interesting, there was an independent company in the US who was collecting information from social media, sending it to the police and trying to sell them that. So I can't even make a comment on that. Here, more, this is not direct, this is cross. I made a mistake. Here you can see from the Justice Center, Constitutional Freedom, Morris said there was no international threat, so he's just making sure that he makes Drummond contradict his previous statement about the international threats. Now, the Ottawa Police Service went again to the video that we were talking about, so he identified as February 18 at Rideau and Sussex, and he was saying that the behavior in the location was anti-authority. We've heard that previous times that the most difficult group was in the Rideau, Sussex, because there was the French group. I never visited the site, so I can't make any comments, but if he says that's where the video was taken, we have to take his word. And then at least he had the decency to describe what was happening. So these are his words, not mine. I don't use the word fellow, but he said, a fellow with backpack, he's not moving on, he's hanging to a sign. Ultimately, he's being combative, and he's behind the officers in the dark clothing that are less lethal officers who only use gas or rubber bullet. I can assure you that this is not going to be exactly pleasant, but okay, I understand it's less lethal. The person on the ground places a hold on the officer. So this is describing the actions of the protester. So he said that the protester grabbed the officer's leg and would not let go. And the officer believed his leg was going to be broken. I find that impossible to believe. But again, I'm trying to be open-minded here. Maybe he was an expert in Kung Fu. I don't think so, but let's be open-minded for a second. In any event, the officer was seen by the paramedics. So in other words, he was not treated. And then he was striking the protester with the tip of the gun. So obviously it's a rifle. But the point is, at least he had the decency to describe the situation. He justifies the situation because of the aggressiveness, but at least he described it. My point of view, this man, 0/10. I can't see what's going on. Really? The whole universe can see what's going on. You can't see it, and you're in charge. Okay. And then for Drummond, I have 8 out of 10. He refuses to acknowledge the intelligence gaps. But he gave visibility of details, including that the U.S. company was spying on Facebook and social media to try to sell information to the government of Ghana. Apparently, it was not successful in the negotiations. I'm really glad. Why should we pay people from other countries to spy on us? And then he had the decency, as I said, to describe the aggression from the police to the protesters. Very tough day. So hopefully tomorrow is going to be better. Thank you for listening.